In the lawless expanse of 1870s Texas, the Red Rock Gang rules through terror and bloodshed. When they set their sights on the quiet Mitchell Ranch, they see only a young woman managing her aging father's land. They don't know Sarah Mitchell was raised by the legendary Jake "Lightning" Mitchell, the fastest gun in Texas history, a man who could draw and fire before others could blink. A man who vanished from sight years ago, leaving behind whispered stories of impossible shots and deadly showdowns. The gang thinks they're targeting a helpless rancher's daughter. Instead, they're about to learn why her father earned the name Lightning, and why his daughter might be even faster. Some legends don't die, they pass their skills to the next generation. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn painted the Texas sky in shades of amber and gold as Sarah Mitchell made her morning rounds. The Mitchell Ranch sprawled across 200 acres of prime grazing land, every inch of it earned through her father's hard work, or so the townsfolk believed. At 22, Sarah managed most of the daily operations now, letting her father Jake rest his supposedly arthritic hands. The morning air carried the scent of sage and prairie grass as she checked the fence line, her father's old colt, revolver riding comfortably at her hip. Most people assumed she carried it for snakes or coyotes. They never questioned why it sat in a custom-tooled holster, worn smooth in places that suggested regular practice draws. "Morning, Charlie," she called to their ranch hand, who was already starting his work in the stables. Charlie Bennett had been with them for 5 years, ever since Jake's accident had supposedly limited his ability to handle the heavier ranch work. He was one of the few who knew there was nothing wrong with Jake Mitchell's hands. Sarah dismounted near the barn, her movements fluid and precise. Years of training under her father's watchful eye had ingrained certain habits, always keeping her right hand free, always maintaining awareness of her surroundings, always appearing completely at ease, while staying ready for anything. Inside the barn, she found Jake Mitchell cleaning tack. His weathered hands moved with deliberate care, each motion measured and efficient. To most observers, he looked like any aging rancher, but Sarah saw what others missed. The calluses on his hands weren't just from ranch work. The way he positioned himself, always with clear lines of sight to both entrances, wasn't just habit. Fence. "Line's clear," Sarah reported, taking up a brush to help with the tack cleaning. "But I saw fresh tracks near the North Creek. Riders, at least 3, probably came through before dawn." Jake nodded, his grey eyes sharp despite his seemingly relaxed demeanor. "Likely just passing through. But keep your eyes open, daughter. Times are changing. Red Rock Gang's been pushing north, taking what they want. Folks who resist tend to have accidents." Sarah understood the warning in his words. They'd built a peaceful life here, carefully maintaining their image as simple ranchers. Jake Lightning Mitchell had disappeared from public memory, replaced by the quiet, limping man who rarely went to town. Only Sarah knew he practiced every day, his speed and accuracy undiminished by the years. "They're hitting smaller ranches first," she said, having heard the rumors in town. "Testing for weakness, looking for easy targets." "And what do you think they'd see here?" Jake asked, the familiar training tone entering his voice. "A young woman running her injured father's ranch. No brothers, no husband. Just an aging man and a few ranch hands." Sarah's voice carried no fear, just tactical assessment. "We look vulnerable." "Good." Jake set aside the clean tack. "Let them think that. Your mother taught me something important before she passed. Sometimes being underestimated is the greatest advantage you can have." Sarah smiled, remembering her mother. Catherine Mitchell had been a force in her own right, teaching Sarah that being a lady didn't mean being helpless. She'd supported Jake's training of their daughter, understanding that in this wild territory, skill with a gun could mean the difference between life and death. The rest of the morning passed in familiar routine. Sarah managed the ranch hands, checked the cattle, and handled the books. To anyone watching, she was simply a capable rancher's daughter. No one needed to know about the hours she spent practicing with her father, learning the family art of lightning-fast draws and deadly accurate shooting. Around noon, Charlie rode in with news from town. "Miss Sarah, Mr. Mitchell, thought you should know. Riders came through early this morning. Been asking questions about local ranches, especially ones that might be easily persuaded to sell." Jake and Sarah exchanged glances. This was how it started. The Red Rock gang never moved directly at first. They sent scouts, gathered information, looked for weak points to exploit. "Thank you, Charlie," Jake said calmly. "Best keep our eyes open." After Charlie left, Sarah turned to her father. "They'll come here eventually. We look like an easy target." Jake Mitchell stood, and for a moment his carefully maintained facade slipped. His posture straightened, his presence becoming something more commanding, more dangerous. "Then let's make sure we're ready when they do. Time for some practice, daughter." Behind the barn, where no casual observer could see, father and daughter spent the afternoon refining their craft. Jake may have vanished from public life, but his skills had only grown sharper with time. He'd passed every technique, every hard-learned lesson to his daughter. Sarah worked through the drills with fluid grace, drawing and firing with impossible speed. Each shot found its mark, each movement precise and economical. Jake watched with pride, correcting minor details, sharing insights earned through years of gunfights. "Remember," he instructed, "speed is good, but accuracy is final. A fast miss is still a miss." As the sun began to set, they returned to their public personas, the limping rancher and his hard-working daughter. But something had changed. There was an edge to the air, a sense of approaching storm. The Red Rock gang was coming, drawn by the prospect of easy prey. They would learn, as others had learned before them, that appearances could be deceiving. The Mitchell Ranch wasn't just a prime piece of grazing land. It was home to a legend and his heir, and they would defend it with skills that had become whispered myths in Texas history. Sarah checked her gun one last time before heading in for supper. "They won't expect much resistance from a woman," she observed. Jake smiled, a glimpse of lightning showing through his rancher's disguise. "No, they won't, and that will be their first mistake." Sheriff Tom Wilson sat in his usual chair outside the Broken Spoke Saloon, watching Sarah Mitchell load supplies into her wagon. 20 years of wearing a badge had taught him to read people, and something about the Mitchells had always nagged at his instincts. He'd seen Sarah handle that wagon in every kind of weather, never missing a step, moving with the kind of balance that came from more than just ranch work. "Mighty strange thing," old Pete Harrison said, settling into the chair. Next to Wilson, the ancient shopkeeper had been in Dead River longer than anyone, his memory stretching back to the town's wildest days. "Way she carries that gun reminds me of someone," Wilson nodded slowly. "Been thinking the same thing. Way she moves, way she watches everything without seeming to, just like—" He stopped, memories stirring from decades past. "Just like Lightning Mitchell," Pete finished. "Fastest gun I ever saw. Remember that day in '55 when the Carson gang tried to rob the bank? 5 men, all shootists. Lightning dropped 3 before they could clear leather. Other 2 surrendered right there. Lightning Mitchell vanished 15 years ago," Wilson reminded him. "After that business with the Hawkins brothers, did he now?" Pete's roomy eyes tracked Sarah as she secured her wagon. "Funny thing about that, Jake Mitchell shows up here 12 years ago, limping from some old war wound, with a 10-year-old daughter. Nobody made the connection. Different territory, different name back then. Inside Maddie's general store, Sarah was carefully choosing ammunition. Maddie Watson, who'd run the store since her husband died, noticed how the young woman's fingers lingered over the highest quality rounds, checking each box with an expert's eye. "Your pa still having trouble with his hands, dear?" Maddie asked innocently. "Saw him rubbing them yesterday when he rode past." Some days are better than others, Sarah replied with practiced ease. But Maddie had seen Jake Mitchell at dawn, when he thought nobody was watching. His hands had moved plenty fast then, checking his saddle with the smooth efficiency of a man who'd never been injured at all. The town's younger folk paid no attention to such things. To them, the Mitchells were just another ranch family, prosperous enough to be respected, but nothing remarkable. Only the old-timers remembered the legends, and they kept their suspicions to themselves. Doc Fuller, setting a young cowboy's broken arm, remembered a night 15 years ago when a man matching Jake Mitchell's description had appeared at his back door. Gunshot wound, professionally cleaned and stitched by the man himself, just needed some supplies. Paid in gold, and disappeared before dawn. The resemblance to the quiet rancher who now brought his cattle in for spring vaccination was striking. But Doc kept that observation to himself. Sarah finished her shopping and headed for the Silver Dollar Cafe. Inside, she found her friend Lucy Torres, the owner's daughter, waiting with coffee. "Riders came through early this morning," Lucy said quietly, "asking about local ranches, especially ones owned by women or older folks. They seemed real interested in your place." Sarah sipped her coffee, her posture relaxed but her eyes constantly moving. "Just looking for investment opportunities, I expect. Like those investors who burned out the Wilson place over in Copper Creek." Lucy's voice carried an edge of fear. "Or the ones who caused that accident at the Thompson Ranch." Before Sarah could respond, the cafe door opened. 3 men entered, dusty from the trail, but wearing expensive guns and boots that had seen little real work. Their eyes swept the room with predatory interest, lingering on Sarah. "Well now," the tallest one drawled, "ain't this a friendly little town? Might just have to stay a while." His hand rested casually near his gun, a deliberate display of implied threat. Sarah continued her conversation with Lucy, seemingly oblivious. But old Pete, watching from outside through the cafe window, saw how her right hand dropped casually to her lap, how her weight shifted slightly for better balance, just like lightning would have done. The strangers took a table near the door, their conversation loud enough to carry. They spoke of land prices, of ranches changing hands, of unfortunate accidents that befell stubborn owners. Their words were careful, but their meaning was clear. Sheriff Wilson, making his afternoon rounds, noted their weapons. Expensive, well-maintained, worn in cross-draw holsters favored by gunfighters. He'd bet his badge they were Red Rock Gang, advanced scouts sizing up potential targets. Sarah finished her coffee and stood to leave. As she passed the stranger's table, the tall one stretched elaborately, his boot deliberately scuffing her path. She stepped over it without comment. But Wilson saw the grace in her movement, the perfect balance that would have served equally well in a gunfight. "Mighty nice ranch you got, Miss Mitchell," the man called after her. "Shame about your pa's hands. Must be hard, woman trying to run a spread that size alone." Sarah paused at the door, sunlight haloing her figure. For just a moment, her stance shifted subtly, and Wilson's breath caught. He'd seen that stance before, 15 years ago, when Lightning Mitchell faced down the Hawkins brothers. Then it passed, and she was just a rancher's daughter again. "We manage well enough," she said, mildly, and left. The strangers exchanged meaningful looks, their target apparently confirmed. But old Pete, Doc Fuller, and Sheriff Wilson shared glances of their own. They remembered Lightning Mitchell, remembered how he could switch from deadly gunfighter to unassuming traveler in the blink of an eye. They saw that same quality in Sarah, and they wondered. As Sarah's wagon rolled out of town, Pete spoke softly to no one in particular. "Red Rock Gang's about to learn what the Hawkins brothers learned. Some legends don't die, they just wait for the right moment to strike." The next few days brought a change to Dead River, subtle as a gathering storm. More strangers appeared in town, all wearing the same expensive guns and carrying themselves with the same predatory confidence. They asked careful questions, watched, locations, and made their presence felt without taking direct action. Sarah noticed the changes during her weekly supply run. Normally, chatty shopkeepers spoke in whispers, conversations dying when the strangers passed by. Fresh bullet holes marked the wall behind Maddie's store. Target practice, the strangers claimed, though the grouping was too precise for casual. Shooting. 3 more farms sold this week, Lucy whispered as she brought Sarah's usual coffee. Peterson Place went for half its value. Williams' family just disappeared overnight, leaving everything behind. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down the cup. They say Red Rock's leader is coming, Jack Deadeye McGrath himself. Sarah had heard of McGrath. Before retiring, her father had kept detailed notes on every gunfighter and outlaw in Texas. McGrath had earned his nickname through a peculiar habit. He shot his victims through the left eye, claiming he could see their souls leave their bodies. "Folks are scared, Miss Mitchell," Charlie reported that evening, returning from town. "Red Rock's been methodical. They find weak spots, apply pressure. Those who sell get low prices but live. Those who resist—" He glanced at Jake, who sat quietly whittling on the porch. "Well, accidents happen." Jake's hands never paused in their careful work, but Sarah saw the slight tension in his shoulders. He was calculating odds, assessing threats, just as he'd done in his lightning days. That night, Sarah caught him in his study, reviewing old papers she'd never seen before. Letters, telegrams, wanted posters, a network of information about Red Rock Gang's operations. Her father might have retired, but he hadn't stopped watching. "McGrath's gotten bolder," Jake said without looking up. "Used to work the borders, staying mobile. Now he's building an empire, taking whole territories piece by piece. Dead River's just his latest target." "Why here?" Sarah asked, though she suspected the answer. "Railroads coming through next year. Land values will triple. Those who own the land then will control everything." He finally looked up, his eyes hard. "McGrath's not just a killer, he's a businessman. He's building something lasting." A shot rang out in the darkness, followed by the crash of breaking glass. Sarah moved, instantly extinguishing the lamp while Jake rolled to cover. Years of training took over as they secured the house. Outside, they found a broken bottle near the study window, wrapped in a note. The message was simple: "Sell or die." The bottle still smelled of whiskey from the Red Rock saloon. "Testing hour." "Response," Jake said quietly, examining the bottle's placement. "Watching to see if we show any unexpected skills." Sarah nodded, understanding. They couldn't reveal their true capabilities, not yet. That would only convince McGrath to hit them harder, faster, with overwhelming force. For now, they had to play the part of frightened ranchers. The next morning brought more signs of escalation. Their south fence was cut in 3 places, cattle scattered across the neighboring property. As Sarah and Charlie rode out to round them up, she spotted riders watching from distant hills. They wanted to be seen, wanted the Mitchells to know they were being observed. In town, the pressure increased. The bank suddenly recalled loans on 3 local ranches. The sheriff found himself dealing with a series of disturbances that kept him from investigating Red Rock's activities. Even the telegraph operator reported problems with the lines, leaving Dead River increasingly isolated. "Like watching a snake coil before it strikes," Sheriff Wilson said when Sarah passed him on the street. His hand rested near his gun, a habit he'd developed recently. "They're positioning themselves, cutting off options. Soon they'll start making direct moves." Sarah maintained her careful facade of worry and uncertainty, playing the role of a concerned daughter. But inside, she felt a familiar calm, the same stillness her father had taught her to find before a gunfight. That afternoon, she found Jake behind the barn, practicing. His draws were silent, smooth as flowing water, faster than eyes could follow. He nodded to the targets he'd set up, and Sarah joined him. Father and daughter moved through their secret drills, preparing for what they knew was coming. McGrath's smart, Jake said between draws. He'll have studied us, looked for weaknesses. The frightened daughter, the crippled father, were exactly the kind of target he likes. Sarah holstered her gun with practiced precision. Then we're exactly what he needs to see, right up until we're not. The sun set blood red that evening, painting Dead River in crimson shadows. Sarah stood on the porch, watching distant campfires flicker in the hills. Red Rock was done hiding, done pretending. They were showing their strength openly now, building, fear pressing harder each day. Tomorrow would bring more pressure, more threats, more accidents designed to convince the Mitchells to sell. But as Sarah checked her gun one last time before bed, she smiled slightly. The Red Rock gang thought they were targeting a weak ranch, an easy conquest. They were about to learn the difference between an easy target and a trap. Jack Deadeye McGrath rode into Dead River like a king entering his kingdom. 12 riders flanked him, their horses worth more than most local yearly incomes. McGrath himself cut an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black duster despite the Texas heat. His gun belt held 2 matching Colts, their ivory handles yellowed with age and use. The town fell silent as they passed, shopkeepers retreating inside, mothers pulling children from the streets. McGrath's reputation preceded him, 27 confirmed kills, all with his signature left-eye shot. But it was his business acumen that truly terrified people. He didn't just kill, he destroyed entire communities, turning prosperous towns into Red Rock-controlled territories. Sarah was at the general store when they arrived. She forced herself to continue loading supplies, maintaining the nervous movements her father had taught her to fake. Every instinct screamed to drop into a fighting stance, to prepare for action, but she kept up her act of innocent ranchers. In daughter, well now, McGrath's voice carried across the street, smooth as aged whiskey. You must be Sarah Mitchell. He dismounted with fluid grace, moving toward her with the confidence of a man unused to being refused. He'd been hearing interesting things about your ranch. Sarah clutched her parcels closer, letting a tremor enter her voice. Mr. McGrath, we've heard of you too. All good things, I hope. His smile never reached his eyes, which remained fixed on her face, studying her reactions. 2 of his men positioned themselves casually near her wagon, cutting off potential escape routes. Mind if we have a word? Business opportunity I'd like to discuss. Before Sarah could respond, Jake's wagon rounded the corner. He played his part perfectly, the slight wince as he climbed down, the stiffness in his movements suggesting old injuries. Sarah, everything all right? McGrath turned, assessing Jake with a predator's gaze. Mr. Mitchell, perfect timing, was just about to discuss the future of your ranch with your lovely daughter. The street had emptied completely. Even the sheriff was conspicuously absent, though Sarah spotted him watching from his office window, face tight with suppressed anger. Everyone knew what was coming. They'd seen this scene play out in other towns. Not much to discuss, Jake said mildly, limping toward them. Ranch isn't for sale. McGrath's men shifted positions subtly, hands near weapons. Their leader maintained his pleasant demeanor, but something cold crept into his voice. Now, Mr. Mitchell, let's be reasonable. Times are changing. Small ranches like yours, they're having trouble lately. Accidents, unfortunate events. Way things are going, might be safer to sell to someone who can protect your interests. Jake steadied himself against the wagon, the picture of an aging, worried rancher. We manage well enough. Do you? McGrath moved closer, looming over Jake. Heard about your hands. Terrible thing, man not being able to hold a gun properly anymore. Dangerous times for a man who can't protect himself. Or his daughter. Sarah saw her father's subtle shift in stance. To most observers, he was shrinking from McGrath's presence, but she recognized his weight distribution, perfectly balanced, ready to draw if needed. Think about it, McGrath continued. $10,000. Good price for land that might not be worth anything soon. Hate to see anything happen to such a nice family operation. A sound drew their attention. Doc Fuller had stepped onto his porch, shotgun held casually in his hands. Down the street, old Pete Harrison stood in his doorway, rifle visible behind him. They couldn't stop McGrath's gang, but they were showing their support, small as it was. McGrath noted the witnesses with a cold smile. "Just making a business offer, folks. No harm in that." He turned back to the Mitchells. "Take a day to think it over. My men will come by tomorrow for your answer." His eyes locked onto Sarah's. "Hope you make the smart choice. Hate to see anything happen to those pretty eyes of yours." The threat was clear. McGrath's signature shot through the left eye. Sarah forced herself to flinch, to look away, though inside she was noting angles, distances, calculating how fast she could draw if needed. As McGrath and his men rode out, Sarah helped her father back into their wagon, maintaining their careful charade. But she caught the look that passed between them. McGrath had made his move, laid out his threat. Tomorrow would bring violence, one way or another. "Mighty fine shooting, those Red Rock boys," Charlie said quietly as they loaded the last supplies. "Saw them practicing earlier, hit coins thrown in the air." Jake nodded slightly. Sarah understood. Charlie was warning them, letting them know what they'd face. But neither Mitchell showed any reaction. They'd both hit smaller targets at greater distances, though no one in Dead River knew that. They rode home in tense silence, aware of distant riders pacing them, watching their reaction. McGrath was testing them, looking for any sign that they were more than they appeared. "Tomorrow, then," Sarah said as they unloaded the wagon. Jake nodded, his fake limp vanishing now that they were alone. "Tomorrow. When they come, they'll expect fear, maybe some token resistance, standard tactics, show overwhelming force, break spirits quickly." And what will they get instead? The look Jake gave her carried echoes of Lightning Mitchell, the legend who had once been the fastest gun in Texas. They'll get exactly what they expect, right up until they don't. Time to remind folks why some legends are best left alone. That evening, as shadows lengthened across the Mitchell ranch, Sarah found her father in the barn's hidden back room. Jake stood before the scarred wooden wall where he'd taught her to shoot, running through the same drills he'd shown her 12 years ago. His draws were still impossibly fast, each movement precise and economical. "Remember your first lesson?" he asked, not turning around. Sarah smiled, memory taking her back to a hot summer day when she was 10 years old. She'd found him cleaning his guns, noticed how his hands moved differently than when others were watching. "A gun's just a tool," she quoted. "It's the mind behind it that matters." Jake nodded, holstering his Colt. "You were so small then, could barely lift the practice pistol, but your eyes, you had your mother's focus." The memory shifted to that first training session. Jake had set up tin cans, shown her the basics of stance and grip. But more importantly, he'd taught her about patience, about the mental discipline that separated true gunfighters from mere shootists. "Most men practice speed," he'd told her. "They want to be quick, to outdraw their opponents. But speed without control is just a fast way to die." Now, 12 years later, Sarah moved to stand beside him. Together, they drew and fired at imaginary targets, their movements perfectly synchronized. Jake had taught her everything, not just shooting, but the subtle arts of deception and misdirection that had kept him alive. "Remember the day you asked why we had to hide?" Sarah said, checking her gun's action. "Why you weren't Lightning Mitchell anymore?" Jake's face darkened slightly. "The Hawkins brothers, 3 men dead in the street and more coming, had to choose between being a legend and being a father." The memory of that conversation was vivid. She'd been 14, frustrated with maintaining their cover. Jake had sat her down, shown her the scars from bullets that had come too close. "A reputation's like a lamp," he'd explained. "It draws attention, makes you a target. Every would-be gunslinger wants to be the man who killed Lightning Mitchell, But a quiet rancher with a bad leg? Nobody looks twice. Sarah practiced her draw, remembering other lessons. How to appear nervous while staying ready. How to stumble in a way that actually improved your shooting position. 1,000 small deceptions that kept them safe. McGrath's different from the others, she observed, breaking from memory. He's not just a killer. No. Jake moved to a locked chest, opened it to reveal stacks of papers, information gathered over years. He builds things, takes over territories, piece by piece, uses fear and violence, but always with a purpose. Sarah recognized some of the papers, telegrams from old contacts, reports from travelers, carefully maintained notes about Red Rock Gang's operations. Her father might have retired from gunfighting, but he'd never stopped watching, never stopped preparing. Another memory surfaced, age 16, the first time she'd beaten him in a speed draw. Instead of congratulations, he'd taught her something more valuable. Being fast isn't enough, he'd said. You have to read people, understand what they're thinking. The best fight is the one you win before it starts. Now, preparing for tomorrow's confrontation, those lessons seemed more vital than ever. Jake laid out McGrath's likely tactics, patterns observed from other raids. They'll come in force, he said, but spread out. McGrath likes to surround his targets, show overwhelming strength. He'll expect the sight of so many guns to break our will. Sarah nodded, remembering another lesson. Show them what they expect to see until it's time not to. Jake smiled slightly. You were always better at that part than me. Gets it from your mother. She could make anyone believe anything. They spent the next hour practicing, but not just shooting. They rehearsed scenarios, planned responses, prepared for every possibility. Jake had taught her that gunfighting wasn't just about speed and accuracy, it was about control, about thinking 3 moves ahead. Remember the Cooper Ranch? Sarah asked as they worked. When those rustlers came through? Jake nodded. Your first real test, 16 years old looking, like a scared girl gathering eggs. They never saw you as a threat until it was too late. The memory was clear. 3 armed men, thinking they'd found easy prey. She'd dropped 2 before they could draw, her speed and accuracy shocking them into surrender. But more importantly, she'd maintained their cover. The shots were dismissed as lucky, the result of desperate fear rather than trained skill. Now, checking their weapons one final time, Sarah saw her father watching her with pride. You've surpassed me, he said quietly, faster, smoother, and smarter about when to show it. Had a good teacher. Sarah holstered her gun, the leather worn smooth from years of practice. Think McGrath suspects anything? He's careful. Probably has some doubts. Men like him don't survive long without good instincts. But he sees what he expects to see. A crippled rancher and his vulnerable daughter. Another lesson surfaced. Let them think they know your secrets. Hide the truth behind smaller deceptions. Tomorrow, Jake said, McGrath will learn what the Hawkins brothers learned. Some legends don't retire. He paused, looking at his daughter with pride. They just pass their skills to the next generation. As night fell over the Mitchell Ranch, father and daughter made their final preparations. To any observer, they appeared to be what McGrath expected, frightened ranchers preparing for a hopeless last stand. But in the barn's hidden room, 2 of the deadliest guns in Texas territory stood ready, their skills honed by years of secret practice. The Red Rock Gang thought they were pressing their advantage against a weak target. Instead, they were walking into a trap set by a legend and his heir. Tomorrow would remind Texas why the name Lightning Mitchell once struck fear into the hearts of outlaws across the territory. Dawn broke blood-red over the Mitchell Ranch. 4 riders approached from the main road, while dust clouds in the distance suggested more circling wide to cut off escape routes. McGrath was taking no chances, surrounding the property before making his move. Sarah stood on the porch, deliberately wringing her hands as she watched them approach. Jake sat in his rocking chair, seemingly dozing, his crippled leg propped up. They made a perfect picture of vulnerability. "Miss Mitchell!" the lead rider called out, reining up at the gate. Sarah recognized him as McGrath's lieutenant, a hard-faced man called Hawkins. "Time for your answer, girl. Boss is being generous, offering fair price for this spread." Sarah let her voice tremble slightly. "Please, we just need more time. Father's not well and time's up." Hawkins dismounted, his spurs jingling against packed earth. "Boss says you either sell now or we start breaking things." He smiled coldly. "Starting with your father's other leg." The other riders spread out, hands resting casually on holstered weapons. They moved with the confidence of men used to facing no real resistance. "Now see here," Jake roused himself, playing the concerned father perfectly. "There's no need for—" Hawkins drew and fired in one smooth motion. The bullet splintered the porch railing inches from Jake's head. "That's your last warning, old man. Sign the papers or the next one won't miss." Sarah saw her father's subtle shift in position. To the raiders, he appeared to be cringing away from the shot. In reality, he was setting up a perfect firing angle. "You boys really ought to reconsider," Jake said mildly. "Violence has a way of breeding violence." Hawkins laughed. "What you gonna do, old-timer? Can't even hold a gun straight with those crippled hands." He turned to Sarah, his expression darkening. "Sign the papers, girl, or watch your father die slow." Sarah let tears fill her eyes, playing her role to the last moment. All right, just let me get them from inside." She turned toward the door, deliberately stumbling slightly. "Tom, go with her," Hawkins ordered. "Make sure she doesn't try anything stupid." The youngest raider dismounted, following Sarah toward the house. As he reached the porch steps, she stumbled again, seemingly catching herself on the railing. The movement brought her right hand near her hidden holster. "Clumsy little thing, ain't you?" Tom grinned, reaching for her arm. "Maybe after this is done, you and me could—" What happened next seemed impossible to the watching raiders. Sarah's stumble turned into fluid motion. Her gun appeared as if by magic, fired once with devastating precision. Tom's gun belt shattered, his weapon spinning away before he could touch it. Simultaneously, Jake's rocking chair became a firing position. His first shot knocked Hawkins's gun from his hand with surgical accuracy. His second put a bullet through. Another raider's hat, the shot so precise it didn't touch flesh. Jesus Christ! The fourth raider tried to draw, but Sarah's next shot removed his gun belt just as cleanly as she'd done to Tom. All four raiders stood disarmed, their weapons scattered in the dust. "Now then," Jake said pleasantly, his aim rock steady. "About that generous offer." Hawkins stared at his bleeding hand, then at the old man he'd dismissed as crippled. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed quickly by fear. You that shooting? Nobody's that fast except—" "Leave!" Sarah interrupted, her gun covering all four men. "Tell McGrath the ranch isn't for sale. Not now, not ever." The raiders backed away slowly, then mounted and rode off at a gallop. In the distance, their reinforcements followed, not willing to test their luck against shooters of such caliber. Once they were gone, Jake holstered his gun with practiced ease. 8 more in the hills, he noted. McGrath's being cautious, keeping reserves back to observe. Sarah nodded, her stance still ready. They'll tell him what happened. Think he'll make the connection? Maybe. But he's ambitious, not stupid. He won't come at us directly now, not until he knows exactly what he's dealing with. Jake's eyes scanned the horizon. He'll test us first, try to learn our limits, like poking a rattler with a stick. Something like that. Jake smiled grimly, but McGrath doesn't know he's poking 2 snakes, not just one, and he certainly doesn't know what kind. Sarah watched dust clouds disappear into the distance. There, her skirmish had been won, but they'd revealed some of their capabilities. McGrath would be more careful now, more calculating. The real war was just beginning. They'll be back, she said quietly. Jake nodded, all pretense of infirmity gone from his bearing. "Yes, but next time they'll be scared. Fear makes men careful, and careful men make mistakes." His eyes held the cold calculation that had made Lightning Mitchell a legend. Mistakes we can use. In town, word spread quickly. 4 of McGrath's men had faced the Mitchells and returned gunless, shaken, talking about impossible shots and lightning-fast draws. The story grew with each telling, but one detail remained constant. Sarah Mitchell wasn't just a rancher's daughter, and her father's hands worked just fine when they needed to. Something had changed in Dead River. The Red Rock Gang had stumbled into a mystery, and their leader wouldn't rest until he uncovered the truth. But as Sarah and Jake cleaned their guns that evening, they knew they'd shown just enough to worry their enemies while keeping their full capabilities hidden. The next move would be McGrath's, and they would be ready. Jack McGrath sat in his private room above the Red Rock Saloon, studying reports from his scattered forces. 4 guns lost, 4 men humiliated, and a disturbing story about shooting that bordered on supernatural. But it was Hawkins's description of Jake Mitchell's gun handling that truly caught his attention. "Clean shots, boss," Hawkins reported, his bandaged hand shaking slightly. "Not lucky hits, deliberate, precise. He shot the guns right out of our hands, and the girl," he swallowed hard. "She moved like a rattler striking. Never seen anything like it." McGrath paced the room, piecing together fragments of information. His network of informants had started digging, and old stories were surfacing. 15 years ago, Lightning Mitchell had disappeared after a legendary gunfight with the Hawkins brothers. No body was ever found. "Get me everything on Mitchell's background," he ordered. "When he arrived, where he came from, and find out who taught that girl to shoot." In town, Sarah noticed the changes immediately. Red Rock's men maintained their distance, watching her with wary respect instead of predatory interest. But she also spotted more observers, better hidden, taking careful notes on her movements. "They're studying us," she told Jake as they worked. The ranch. 3 watchers in the hills, another 2 trying to look casual in town. Jake nodded slightly, maintaining his limp for their audience. McGrath's smart. He won't rush in again until he understands what he's facing. Their prediction proved accurate. Over the next few days, Red Rock's tactics shifted from intimidation to investigation. Strangers appeared asking questions about the Mitchells' past. Old-timers found themselves buying drinks were less about local land prices and more about lightning. Mitchell's legendary feats. "They're piecing it together," Sheriff Wilson warned Sarah during a supply run. "McGrath's got telegrams flying to every territory, tracking down your history. Man like that, he won't stop until he knows exactly who he's dealing with." Sarah maintained her public persona of concern while inwardly calculating angles and distances. 3 of McGrath's men were watching this conversation, their positions carefully chosen to cover multiple approaches. "Time's working against us," Jake observed that evening as they practiced behind closed doors. "Every day gives McGrath more chances to learn the truth." Sarah cleaned her gun with practiced efficiency. "Maybe that's not bad. Let him waste time chasing old stories while we prepare." But McGrath wasn't just investigating. Reports came of Red Rock gathering reinforcements. Hired guns arrived daily, some of them names that even Jake recognized from his lightning days. McGrath was building an army, determined not to be outgunned. Again, the pressure built in subtle ways. Ranch hands reported threats to their families, forcing them to quit. Supply deliveries became unreliable. Cattle buyers suddenly found other sources. McGrath was trying to isolate the Mitchells, cut them off from support. "Smart strategy," Jake admitted, watching another hand ride away. Only Charlie remained loyal, having nowhere else to go. "McGrath knows a direct attack failed. Now he's trying to starve us out." Sarah stood at the window, counting distant campfires. Red Rock's forces grew daily, their camps forming a loose circle around the Mitchell ranch. "They're getting bolder, testing our range, seeing how close they can get." A shot rang out in the darkness, deliberately wide. Another test, another probe of their defenses. They didn't return fire. That would reveal their positions and capabilities. Instead, they watched and waited, letting McGrath's men grow increasingly nervous about what they couldn't see. "Got word from town," Charlie reported, returning from a supply run. "McGrath's offering $500 to anyone who can tell him where Jake Mitchell was 15 years ago. 1,000 if they can prove any connection to lightning." Jake's expression remained neutral, but Sarah saw the calculation in his eyes. McGrath was close to the truth, and when he found it, he'd come at them with everything he had. That night, as they checked their weapons and ammunition, Sarah found her father, studying old wanted posters. "Lightning." Mitchell's face stared back, younger but unmistakable. "McGrath won't stop," she said quietly. "Even if he confirms who you are, he can't back down now. His reputation won't allow it." Jake nodded grimly. "No, he can't. That's why he's building his forces, gathering gunmen. When he finally moves, it'll be with overwhelming force. Then why are we waiting? Why not take the fight to him?" "Because, daughter," Jake's voice carried echoes of Lightning Mitchell's legendary calm. "Right now, he's scared and cautious. Men like that make mistakes. When he learns the truth, he'll come at us with everything he has. That's when we'll really show him what we can do." In town, McGrath received another telegram. His eyes narrowed as he read the confirmation he'd been seeking. The pieces were falling into place, the mystery unraveling. Jake Mitchell's past was becoming clearer, and with it, the realization of exactly what kind of fight he'd stumbled into. The storm was gathering. Soon it would break over Dead River with a fury that would become legend. The morning sun had barely cleared the horizon when Sarah spotted trouble riding into Dead River. 3 of McGrath's newest hired guns, professional killers with reputations nearly as dark as their employers, were harassing Lucy outside the cafe. Sarah had been making her weekly supply run, her wagon loaded with ammunition hidden beneath innocent-looking farm supplies. "Come on, pretty thing," the tallest gunman drawled, backing Lucy against the wall. "Just tell us what you know about the Mitchells. Make it easier on everyone." Sarah's hands remained relaxed at her sides as she approached, though her mind calculated angles, distances, potential ricochet shots. Jake had taught her that the deadliest predators never showed tension before they struck. "Let her go," Sarah's voice carried clearly down the street. "She doesn't know anything." The gunmen turned, their expressions shifting from surprise to predatory interest. They'd heard about the Mitchell girls shooting, but clearly didn't believe the stories. "Well now," the tall one smiled, hand resting near his gun. "Just the lady we wanted to see. Been hearing interesting tales about you and your pa." Sarah maintained her carefully crafted appearance of nervous determination. "Please just leave us alone. We don't want trouble." Too late for that, girl. The second gunman moved to flank her, while the third stayed back, watching the street. They were professionals, used to working as a team. "Boss wants answers, and we mean to get them." What happened next would be talked about in Dead River for years. Sarah's transformation from frightened rancher's daughter to deadly gunfighter happened faster than eyes could follow. Her first shot took the tall man's gun before he could clear leather. Her second and third shots disarmed his companions so quickly it sounded like a single report. But it was her fourth shot that became legend. The third gunman, falling back, had drawn a hidden derringer. Sarah, without turning, fired over her shoulder and split the small gun in half, the bullet passing perfectly between the man's fingers without drawing blood. Dead River's street had gone silent. From the hotel balcony, McGrath himself stood watching, his expression unreadable. Sarah kept her gun ready but unthreatening as she helped Lucy to safety. "Impossible," the tall gunman whispered, staring at his bleeding hand. "Nobody's that fast except—" Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Sweet Jesus, you're Lightning Mitchell's kid." The effect of those words rippled through the gathering crowd. Old-timers who remembered Lightning's legend nodded knowingly, while younger folks whispered questions. McGrath's expression darkened as another piece of the puzzle fell into place. "Tell your boss," Sarah said clearly, knowing McGrath could hear, "that harassing townspeople won't get him what he wants. We're not selling. Not now. Not ever." "Sheriff." Wilson appeared, his badge catching the morning sun. His deputies flanked him, and Sarah noticed they positioned themselves between McGrath's men and the crowd. The town was choosing sides. "Think you boys better ride out," Wilson said mildly, though his hand rested near his gun. "Seen enough trouble for one morning?" The gunmen mounted up, their professional composure shaken. As they rode past McGrath's position, Sarah heard the tall one speak. "It ain't natural, boss. Girl shoots like her pa, maybe better. Like they ain't even human." McGrath's cold eyes met Sarah's for a long moment. She let him see it now, the calm deadliness that Jake had taught her to hide. A flicker of uncertainty crossed the gang leader's face before he turned away. The crowd dispersed slowly, but something had changed. Sarah felt it in the way people looked at her, not with fear, but with something closer to hope. Dead River had lived under Red Rock's shadow for too long. Now they'd seen someone stand up to them and win. "Just like your father," Doc Fuller said quietly as she passed. "Saw him do similar once, back in '58. 4 men trying to rob the bank. He disarmed them all without spilling a drop of blood." More stories emerged as Sarah loaded her wagon. Old-timers shared memories of Lightning, Mitchell's exploits, each tale adding to the growing legend. But these weren't just stories anymore. They'd seen those same skills in his daughter. Back at the ranch, Jake was waiting. "Heard the shooting," he said calmly. 3 shots, almost as one." 4, Sarah corrected, dismounting. "Had to discourage. A hidden derringer," Jake nodded proudly. "Clean shots?" "Of course. Just like you taught me. Disarm, don't kill. Let them spread the story." McGrath saw? Yes. He knows now, or at least suspects. Lightning Mitchell's daughter trained in his image. Jake's expression turned serious. "He'll come hard now. No more testing, no more games. He has to, or his reputation's finished." Sarah checked her gun, the motion smooth from years of practice. "Let him come. I'm tired of hiding what we can do." As evening approached, riders reported McGrath's forces were gathering. The hired guns who'd witnessed Sarah's shooting had spread the word. Lightning Mitchell's legacy lived on in his daughter. Some men quit on the spot, wanting no part of facing such skill. Others, driven by pride or greed, stayed. McGrath himself remained in his room, studying old wanted posters and newspaper clippings. The mystery of the Mitchells was unraveling, revealing something more dangerous than he'd imagined. He'd come to Dead River looking for easy targets, vulnerable ranchers he could bully or buy out. Instead, he'd found Lightning Mitchell's heir, trained in all her father's skills, and perhaps surpassing them. The simple land grab had become something else, a challenge to his authority, a threat to his reputation. He couldn't back down now, couldn't show weakness. But as he watched the sunset over Dead River, McGrath felt something he hadn't experienced in years: doubt. 3 riders appeared on the horizon at dusk, silhouetted against the dying sun. They approached Dead River slowly, deliberately, their horses showing the dust of long travel. But there was nothing tired in how they carried themselves. Each man sat his saddle with the easy vigilance of veteran gunfighters. Sarah spotted them from the general store and recognized the danger in their bearing. These weren't McGrath's usual hired guns. These men were something else entirely. "Thunder Riders," old Pete whispered, using a term Sarah hadn't heard before. "Men who bring storms with them." The lead rider was tall and lean, grey-streaked hair visible beneath his black hat. The second was broader, carrying a shotgun in a modified saddle holster. The third moved with a peculiar fluid grace, his duster concealing what Sarah suspected were multiple weapons. McGrath's men watched from the saloon as the strangers dismounted outside the sheriff's office. The gang leader himself appeared on the balcony, studying the newcomers with clear concern. "Afternoon, Sheriff," the gray-haired man said quietly. "Looking for Jake Mitchell." Wilson's hand stayed near his gun. "Might be I know where to find him. Might be I need to know why you're asking." The stranger smiled slightly. "Tell him Thomas Deadshot Davis is here, with John Two-Gun Tucker and Silent Pete Martinez." He paused, then added, "Tell him Lightning's old crew has come to pay respects." The effect of those names was electric. McGrath's men retreated into the saloon, while old-timers whispered in awe. These men were legends themselves, each with a reputation nearly as fearsome as Lightning Mitchell's had been. Sarah approached, openly letting them see her. Davis turned and his eyes widened slightly. "Catherine's girl," he said softly. "Lord, you look just like your mother." "You knew her?" "Knew her? Lady, your mother once saved all our lives with nothing but a derringer and a pot of coffee." He touched his hat respectfully. "Been hearing interesting things about you and your father. Thought we'd ride by, see if old friends needed help." McGrath watched this exchange intently, adding new pieces to the puzzle. These weren't just any gunfighters. They were Lightning Mitchell's former partners, men who'd ridden with him during his most legendary days. At the ranch, Jake stood waiting on the porch. His familiar limp was gone, replaced by the straight-backed stance of a veteran gunfighter. The years seemed to fall away as his old crew approached. "Took you long enough," he said mildly. "Well," Tucker dismounted with fluid grace, "had to make sure you actually needed us. Heard you got yourself a new Lightning now." He nodded respectfully to Sarah. Inside, over coffee, the old crew shared stories that filled in gaps in Sarah's knowledge of her father's past. She learned about the time they'd faced down 20 bandits at Eagle Pass, how they'd protected a wagon train through Apache territory, how they'd become the most feared and respected peacekeepers in 3 territories. "Your father," Davis told her, "wasn't just fast, he was smart. Taught us all that speed alone won't keep you alive. It's knowing when to shoot, and more importantly, when not to." Silent Pete, living up to his name, simply nodded. But he demonstrated what they meant, drawing his gun with blinding speed and freezing halfway, showing how Lightning had taught them to control every aspect of the motion. "McGrath's got reputation and numbers," Tucker observed, cleaning his guns with practiced ease, "but he's never faced anything like the old crew, especially not with a new Lightning in the mix." Sarah watched them prepare their weapons, noting how each man had his own style, but followed the same principles her father had taught her. "Why did you really come?" she asked finally. Davis looked up, his eyes serious. "Because your father once rode 3 days through a blizzard to save my life. Because your mother patched us up more times than I can count, but mostly," he smiled slightly, "because McGrath and his kind need to learn that some legends don't die. They just wait for the right moment to remind folks why they became legends. In the first place, as night fell, McGrath called his lieutenants together. The arrival of Lightning's old crew changed everything. These weren't just gunfighters, they were living legends, men whose combined reputations might actually eclipse his own." "Boss," Hawkins said nervously, "maybe we should reconsider. With Davis and them here, no." McGrath's voice was cold. "We've come too far. Tomorrow we finish this, all of it." But in his private room, studying reports of his forces, McGrath felt the cold touch of fear. He'd come to Dead River hunting what he thought was easy prey. Instead, he'd stirred up something from the past, something that had been waiting quietly for just such a moment. At the Mitchell Ranch, the old crew took up positions they'd last used 15 years ago. Each man knew his role, guided by decades of experience and trust. Sarah watched them work, understanding now why her father's training had been so specific, so precise. He hadn't just taught her to shoot, he taught her an entire way of fighting, developed and perfected by men who'd become living legends. "Tomorrow then," Jake said quietly. Davis nodded, checking his rifle one last time. Tomorrow. Time to remind folks why they used to whisper our names around campfires. Sarah felt the weight of history, of legacy, settling around them. Tomorrow would write new legends, or end old ones forever. Dead River woke to a town transformed. The arrival of Lightning Mitchell's old crew had split the community as clearly as a knife stroke. Those who'd suffered under McGrath's rule gathered quietly in Maddie's store, the church, and the cafe, sharing hopeful whispers about liberation. Others, compromised by bribes or threats, huddled in the Red Rock saloon, knowing their fates were now tied to McGrath's success. Sarah rode into town for supplies, flanked by Silent Pete and Two Gun. Tucker. The streets cleared before them, townsfolk pressing against buildings to avoid being caught in their path. Even McGrath's men kept their distance, hands nervously near their guns, but never quite touching them. Like old times, Tucker muttered, his eyes constantly scanning rooflines and windows. People either love you or fear you, nothing in between. Inside the general store, Maddie pulled Sarah aside while the others kept watch. McGrath's been burning telegrams, she whispered, called in every favor, every marker, more guns arriving, hourly. She hesitated. But there's something else. He's offering gold to anyone who can wound you. Says he wants you alive to watch him kill your father. Sarah's expression didn't change, but her hand drifted closer to her gun. He's welcome. To try. Outside they found Davis deep in conversation with Sheriff Wilson. The lawman's face was grim. McGrath's deputized 20 men, he reported. Claims he's restoring order to Dead River. Gave me till sundown to turn in my badge. And? Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Wilson's hand rested on his gun. Told him he could have my badge when he pried it off my cold, dead chest. Folks need to choose sides sometimes. Might as well choose right. Throughout the day, the divide deepened. Ranchers who'd suffered McGrath's extortion brought food and ammunition to the Mitchell Ranch. Others, fearful of Red Rock's vengeance, packed up and fled town. By noon, Dead River had become an armed camp, with McGrath's forces controlling the east side, while Mitchell's allies gathered in the west. He's not just a bandit anymore, Jake observed, watching through his window as another group of hired guns rode in. McGrath's trying to make this legitimate, turn it into law versus outlaws. That's why he's deputizing men. Won't work, Davis cleaned his rifle with methodical precision. Too many folks remember Lightning Mitchell as a force for justice. McGrath can't rewrite that history. Sarah returned from another supply run with news. McGrath's offering pardons to any man who rides with him. Claims he's got a judge's authority to clean up the territory. More likely bought a judge, Tucker spat. Man's trying to turn his gang into an army. The tension peaked when Lucy Torres ran into the cafe, breathless with news. Riders coming! At least 30, all wearing badges. Sarah and the old crew moved to defensive positions, but Jake's expression showed recognition. Not McGrath's men, he said quietly. Those are real badges. Around the corner rode Marshal Dan Hawthorne, leading a column of territorial lawmen. The marshal was a legend, in his own right known for his unflinching honesty. He'd worked with Lightning Mitchell in the past, though few remembered that connection. McGrath himself emerged to meet them, all smooth confidence and legal documents. Marshal, welcome to Dead River. We've been dealing with some resistance to legal authority. Save it, McGrath. Hawthorne's voice cut like a blade. Got some interesting telegrams about your legal authority. Seems that judge you bought had a crisis of conscience, confessed everything. The gang leader's face hardened. You're interfering with a legitimate law enforcement operation. No. The marshal's hand rested near his gun. I'm giving you one chance to withdraw your men and leave Dead River. After that, we do this the hard way. McGrath's smile showed teeth. Marshal, I've got 60 guns saying this is my town now. Even with your posse, you're outnumbered. Might want to check that math again. The new voice came from Jake Mitchell, who stood in the street with his old crew flanking him. His limp was gone, his stance that of a man who'd faced down armies. Sarah moved to his side, her presence adding weight to his words. "Between the Marshall's men, my old friends, and the townsfolk you've terrorized," Jake continued, "I'd say the numbers aren't in your favor." McGrath's eyes darted around, counting angles and allies. His expression showed the calculation of a man watching his plans crumble. But when he spoke, his voice carried deadly certainty. "Tonight, then," he said softly. "No more deputies, no more legal games, just guns in the street like the old days." His eyes fixed on Jake. "You, me, and everyone who rides with us. Winner takes Dead River." "Winner takes nothing," Sarah stepped forward. "You rode in here thinking you could bully and buy your way to power. Time to learn why some targets aren't worth pursuing." As McGrath stalked away, Marshal Hawthorne approached the Mitchells. "Been a long time, Lightning. Too long, Dan." Jake's voice carried respect. "Thought you'd retired." "Hard to rest when men like McGrath poison everything they touch." The Marshal studied Sarah. "This your girl? Heard she's carrying on the family tradition." "She's surpassed it," Jake said proudly. "McGrath just doesn't know it yet." The sun began, its descent toward horizon, painting Dead River's streets in blood-red light. Every man and woman in town knew that tomorrow would bring violence such as the territory hadn't seen in 15 years. The only question was who would be left standing. When the smoke cleared, night fell over Dead River like a funeral shroud. Sarah made her final rounds, checking positions with the Marshal's men and her father's old crew. But something nagged at her instincts, a lesson Jake had drilled into her since childhood. When everything seems set, look closer. That's when betrayal cuts deepest. The first sign came from Lucy, who burst into the Marshal's temporary headquarters, her face pale. "The telegraph lines are down," she reported. "All of them, operators missing too." Marshal Hawthorne frowned. "McGrath's cutting us off. Standard tactics." "No." Sarah's mind raced, connecting pieces. "The lines were fine an hour ago. I watched Jim send that message to the territorial office myself." A cold certainty settled in her gut. "Someone inside our group helped cut them." Before anyone could respond, gunfire erupted from the east end of town. But instead of McGrath's men attacking, it was chaos. Marshal's deputies firing at each other, positions suddenly exposed, carefully planned defenses falling apart. "Impossible," Davis muttered. "Those positions were secret unless someone sold us out." Jake finished, his voice carrying the weight of bitter experience. The answer walked through the door, guns drawn. Charlie Bennett, their loyal ranch hand of 5 years, led a group of McGrath's men into the headquarters. His familiar face now wore a stranger's cold smile. "Sorry, Miss Sarah," he said, though his voice held no remorse. "McGrath pays better than cattle ranching." Sarah's hand moved toward her gun, but Charlie's next words froze her. "I wouldn't. Got 30 men surrounding this building. More importantly, got a shooter on your father with orders to kill if you try anything fancy." Jake stood completely still, a red dot from a scope dancing on his chest. Sarah saw the tactical nightmare they'd walked into. Charlie knew all their plans, all their defensive positions, every fallback point they'd prepared. 5 years, Sarah said quietly. "You worked our ranch, ate at our table. 5 years watching, learning, reporting everything to McGrath." Charlie's smile widened. "Your practice sessions, your secret signals, every trick Lightning Mitchell taught you. The boss knows it all now." Marshal Hawthorne started to move, but Charlie's men had every angle covered. "You're interfering with federal law enforcement," the Marshal warned. "Federal law?" Charlie laughed. "McGrath owns 3 judges and 2 territorial governors. By morning, he'll have papers showing he's the law here. You'll be the outlaws." More gunfire outside. Sarah recognized the pattern. There, Allies being systematically isolated and surrounded, their careful plans turned against them. Charlie had helped design those same defenses. You were never just a ranch hand, Jake said, understanding dawning. McGrath planted you years ago. Smart man. Boss plays the long game. When he heard rumors about a rancher who might be lightning Mitchell in hiding, he sent me to watch. Took 5 years to confirm it, to learn all your secrets. Charlie's eyes turned hard. Now we know exactly what we're dealing with and exactly how to beat it. The betrayal ran deeper than just tactical information. Charlie had been their friend, had shared meals and stories, had become part of their lives. That personal knowledge made him more dangerous than any gunfighter. Here's how this plays out, Charlie continued. You surrender now, nice and quiet. Boss gets his public victory over Lightning Mitchell. Maybe your girl lives through it, depending on how cooperative you are. Sarah's mind raced through options, but Charlie knew her tricks, knew her shooting patterns. He'd positioned his men precisely to counter her speed and accuracy. Even if she somehow got to her gun, Jake would die before she could save him. Or, Charlie's voice hardened, we do this the hard way. Either way, McGrath wins. He's got the law, the guns, and now he's got Dead River's legend right where he wants him. Outside, more shooting. Sarah recognized the voices. Tucker and Davis, probably. Surrounded like they were. The marshal's men were being systematically disarmed and captured. 5 years of preparation, undone in minutes by a man they'd trusted. Time to choose. Charlie raised his gun. Though if you're thinking about trying something clever, remember, I've watched you practice. I know exactly how fast you are, exactly what angles you prefer. And I've trained these men specifically to counter every move you might make. Sarah met her father's eyes, seeing in them the same cold calculation she felt. Charlie had them trapped, tactically and legally. By morning, McGrath would have the paperwork to make his takeover legitimate. The marshal would be branded an outlaw, the Mitchells would be criminals, and Dead River would fall. But Jake had taught her something else, years ago. When a traitor thinks they know all your secrets, that's when you show them what real deception looks like. The question was, did they have any secrets left to reveal? In the tense silence of the marshal's occupied headquarters, Jake Mitchell began to laugh. It wasn't the nervous laughter of a defeated man, but something darker, more dangerous, a sound that made even Charlie's confident smile falter. 5 years watching, Jake said softly. 5 years thinking you knew all our secrets. He straightened, and the change in his bearing made hardened gunmen step back. Tell me, Charlie, did you ever wonder why I let you see so much? Charlie's gun didn't waver, but uncertainty crept into his eyes. You didn't let me see anything. I was clever, careful. You saw exactly what I wanted you to see. Jake's voice carried the authority that had once made Lightning Mitchell's name feared across 3 territories. Every practice session, every secret signal, all of it carefully chosen, deliberately revealed. Sarah caught her father's meaning instantly. The secret practices Charlie had witnessed had been real, but they weren't their only practices. Jake had taught her that true deception meant showing enough truth to make the lies believable. You're bluffing, Charlie said, but his voice carried a tremor. I know every move you've got, every trick, every signal. You know what we showed. You. Sarah took up her father's tone, letting her own carefully maintained facade drop. Did you really think Lightning Mitchell would teach his real secrets where anyone could see? Outside, the shooting had stopped. The night held its breath, waiting. Charlie licked his lips nervously. Doesn't matter. We've got you surrounded, outnumbered. Even Lightning Mitchell can't outshoot 30 men. Jake smiled, and it was Lightning's smile, the one that had preceded some of the deadliest gunfights in Texas history. Remember that story about the Hawkins brothers, the one everyone knows? Charlie nodded slightly. It was legend. Lightning Mitchell facing down 3 notorious killers in broad daylight. That's the public version, Jake continued. The real story. It happened at night, in a crowded room, with 40 guns pointed at me. His voice dropped lower. "Want to know how many walked out?" The red dot of the sniper's scope disappeared from Jake's chest. Through the window, Sarah caught a glimpse of Davis's shadow moving. Across a rooftop, Charlie hadn't known about all their allies, or all their signals. "You're still trapped," Charlie insisted, but he was sweating now. McGrath's got the law on his side. By morning, Marshal Hawthorne spoke up. "You really think I only sent one telegram before your men cut the lines?" He smiled grimly. "Federal cavalry's already riding. Been in motion since yesterday. Those papers McGrath's waiting for, they'll never arrive." Charlie's men began glancing at each other nervously. They'd signed on to help a legitimate takeover, not to fight federal troops. More importantly, they were starting to realize they didn't know everything about their opponent's capabilities. "Last chance," Jake said quietly. "Surrender now. Testify against McGrath. Maybe see sundown tomorrow. Otherwise—" He left the threat unspoken. "You're both covered," Charlie snarled. "One wrong move and—" Sarah moved. Not the quick draw, Charlie had watched her practice for years, but something else, a technique Jake had taught her in secret, passed down from his own mentor. Her gun seemed to materialize in her hand, fired once with supernatural precision. Charlie's gun fell to pieces, its barrel, hammer, and cylinder scattered across the floor. His men's weapons followed an instant later, Sarah's shots so fast they sounded like a single report. "That's not possible," Charlie whispered. "I watched you practice every day for 5 years." "No," Sarah kept her gun trained steadily. "You watched what we wanted McGrath's spy to see. A good hunter always keeps something in reserve." Outside, more shadows moved. Silent Pete and Tucker had freed the marshal's men, turning the tables on their captors. The night erupted in gunfire again, but this time it was McGrath's forces falling back in disorder. "McGrath's entire plan relied on your intelligence," Jake told the shaking Charlie. "Every strategy, every position, all based on what you thought. You knew about us." He stepped forward, and for the first time, Charlie saw the true Lightning Mitchell, the legend that had made hardened killers surrender rather than face him. "Want to guess how much of that intelligence is actually useful?" The sound of approaching horses cut through the night. McGrath's voice called out, "Charlie, report! What's happening?" But Charlie just stood there, staring at Jake and Sarah with dawning horror as he realized the full depth of his mistake. He hadn't infiltrated their operation. They had used him, fed him exactly the information they wanted McGrath to have. "Tell him," Sarah suggested, her gun never wavering. "Tell him he's about to learn why some legends are best left alone." The night was still young, and Lightning Mitchell's real secrets were just beginning to show themselves. McGrath's rage transformed Dead River's main street into a killing ground. After Charlie's capture and the revelation that his intelligence was compromised, the gang leader abandoned all pretense of legality. Bullets shattered windows and splintered wood as his men fired at anything that moved. "Burn it!" McGrath's voice carried over the chaos. "Burn everything! Smoke them out!" Sarah and Jake watched from the marshal's office as torch-carrying raiders set fire to the livery stable. The flames painted the pre-dawn sky in hellish orange, casting twisted shadows across building fronts. "He's lost control," Marshal Hawthorne observed, checking his ammunition. "Man like McGrath, his power comes from appearing invincible. Now that's gone, he's desperate. Desperate men are the most dangerous." Jake loaded his guns with practiced efficiency. "He'll throw everything at us now, no holding back." Sarah moved to the window, counting positions. McGrath had at least 40 men left, now concentrated in the town center. They'd abandoned their careful tactical positions, the ones based on Charlie's faulty intelligence, and fallen back to pure numbers and firepower. "Town can't take much more of this," Davis reported, slipping in through the back door. "Fires spreading. McGrath's men are getting bolder, less careful about who they hit. As if to emphasize his point, screams erupted from the general store. McGrath's raiders had cornered several townspeople who hadn't evacuated in time. The gang leader's voice rose again. "Mitchell, you've got 1 hour. Surrender, or I start killing hostages." Sarah felt the familiar cold calm settle over her. "He's trying to force us into the open, make us fight on his terms." Terms. Jake's voice carried bitter amusement. Been a long time since anyone tried to dictate terms to Lightning Mitchell. He turned to Sarah, and she saw in his eyes the same deadly focus she felt. Time to remind them why. The marshal's men had established a defensive perimeter, but McGrath's superior numbers were slowly pushing it back. The gang leader had positioned sharpshooters on the hotel roof, their rifles keeping rescue attempts at bay while his men gathered more hostages. "I count 6 on the roof," Tucker reported, his experienced eye gauging distances. "Another 8 in the hotel itself. Rest are spread through the streets, using hostages as shields." Jake nodded, pieces of a plan forming. "Sarah, remember that trick we practiced? The one Charlie never saw?" Sarah smiled slightly. That particular technique had been taught in absolute secrecy, passed down from Jake's own mentor. "The falling star?" "McGrath's watching for our usual patterns. Time to show him something new." The gang leader's voice boomed out again. 40 minutes, Mitchell. Then I start putting bullets through eyes, just like the old days." Dawn was approaching, the first grey light painting building tops. McGrath had chosen this time deliberately, thinking the growing light would work against defenders in shadow. But he didn't know about the mirrors Sarah and Jake had positioned days ago, carefully hidden and ready to redirect the sunrise. "Marshal," Jake's voice carried the authority of decades of experience. "When we move, your men need to be ready. This only works if we hit them from all sides at once." Hawthorne studied the legendary gunfighter. "You're that sure about this plan?" "McGrath thinks he knows what we can do, thinks Charlie's intelligence told him everything." Jake checked his gun one final time. "Let's show him how wrong he is." Sarah moved to her position, every step calculated. She caught glimpses of Davis and Tucker doing the same, the old crew falling into a pattern they'd practiced in secret. Even Silent Pete's shadow seemed to carry deadly purpose. The hostages huddled in the street, surrounded by McGrath's men. The gang leader himself stood on the hotel's porch, his black duster making him look like a demon in the firelight. His voice carried clearly in the pre-dawn stillness. 30 minutes, Mitchell. Want to guess which hostage dies first?" "Maybe that. A pretty cafe girl or old Pete? Clock's ticking." Sarah found her father's eyes across the square. The same thought passed between them. McGrath had orchestrated this confrontation for years, gathering intelligence, building forces, planning every detail. But he didn't know about the real Lightning Mitchell technique, the one so deadly it had only been used once before, the one that had become merely a whispered legend, too incredible for most to believe, the one Charlie had never seen them practice. Dawn approached Dead River like an executioner's blade, promising to bring either salvation or destruction. But as Sarah checked her gun one final time, she smiled slightly. McGrath thought he was forcing a final confrontation. Instead, he was walking into Lightning Mitchell's last, greatest trap. The first rays of dawn crept over Dead River's rooftops as McGrath's deadline approached. The gang leader paced the hotel porch like a caged mountain lion, his patience wearing thin with each passing minute. The fire from the livery stable had spread to 2 other buildings, filling the street with drifting smoke. 20 minutes, Mitchell. His voice carried a ragged edge now. "Maybe I start with fingers first. See how many it takes before you show yourself." Lucy, tied with other hostages in the street center, caught Sarah's eye through the smoke. The cafe owner's daughter gave an almost imperceptible nod. She'd managed to work her hands partly free, just as they'd planned. Around the square, other hostages made similar minute movements, following instructions Sarah had quietly spread over the past weeks. "Mirrors are set," Davis whispered, his voice barely carrying to Sarah's position. "First light hits in 3 minutes. Jake's voice came softly through the pre-dawn gloom. Remember, girl, the falling star isn't just about speed. It's about making them think they know where you are, right until they don't. Sarah checked her gun one final time. The technique Jake had taught her in secret was considered impossible by most gunfighters. Even Lightning Mitchell had only used it once, in a fight so legendary, most thought it was mere story. Getting nervous, Mitchell. McGrath fired a shot, into the air. 15 minutes now, or maybe I just start shooting hostages until you appear. The gang leader's men shifted uneasily. They'd signed on for a simple takeover, not this descent into madness. Some had already slipped away in the chaos, unnerved by how their supposedly perfect intelligence had proven worthless. Marshal Hawthorne's voice carried quietly through the shadows. My men are in position, just waiting on your signal. Sarah felt the familiar calm settling over her, deeper than anything Charlie had ever seen her practice. This was the real technique, the one passed down through generations of legendary gunfighters. The one that had made Lightning Mitchell's name whispered around campfires. 10 minutes! McGrath's voice cracked slightly. Show yourself, Lightning! Face me like a man! The first direct sunlight struck the hidden mirrors. Sarah caught the brief flash of reflection, the signal they'd arranged. Around the square, the hostages tensed imperceptibly, ready for their part. Jake's voice drifted one last time. Remember, daughter, the secret isn't in the speed. It's in making them look where you aren't. Sarah moved slightly, letting her shadow briefly touch the smoke. One of McGrath's men spotted it, called out, There, by the general store! Guns turned toward the location. But Sarah was already elsewhere, ghosting through shadows like her father had taught her. The technique that had become legend, that Charlie had never witnessed in 5 years of watching. 5 minutes, Mitchell! McGrath raised his gun toward Lucy's head. Time's running out! The gang leader's men had spread out, trying to cover every approach, but they were looking for conventional attacks, the kind Charlie had reported. They didn't know about the real Lightning Mitchell method, the one that had ended the notorious Carson gang in a single impossible moment. Dawn broke over Dead River's rooftops, and with it came the moment of truth. Either Lightning Mitchell's legacy would end here, or McGrath would learn why some legends survived the ages. Sarah's voice suddenly carried from an impossible direction. Time's up, McGrath. The gang leader spun, his gun seeking a target that wasn't there. The falling star was about to begin, and Dead River would never be the same. The falling star technique began with a single shot that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. McGrath's gun flew from his hand, spinning through the air like a deadly puppet cut from its strings. Before anyone could react, 2 more shots rang out, impossibly fast, impossibly accurate, disarming the men closest to the hostages. What in God's name? McGrath grabbed for his backup gun, but Sarah's voice came from a new direction, accompanied by another disarming shot. The secret, she called, her voice seeming to drift through the smoke, isn't about being fast. 3 more shots, 3 more guns spinning away. It's about being everywhere. The gang members spun wildly, trying to track her movement. But Sarah was implementing the technique perfectly, appearing as multiple shadows in the smoke, each one drawing fire before vanishing. Jake had taught her that the human mind couldn't process someone moving this way, would try to make sense of it by seeing multiple targets. Impossible! McGrath's lieutenant screamed as his gun went flying. Nobody can shoot like that. Lightning Mitchell could. Jake's voice now from an entirely different direction. Father and daughter had synchronized their movements perfectly, becoming ghost-like figures that seemed to flicker through the smoke, and he taught his daughter everything he knew. The hostages moved as one, dropping flat as planned, leaving McGrath's men exposed. The gang leader's carefully positioned forces dissolved into chaos as guns flew from hands, bullets threading through impossible spaces to disarm without killing. The falling star, old Pete whispered in awe. Never thought I'd live to see it. McGrath's men began to break, running for horses only to find their way blocked by Marshall's deputies. The gang leader himself stood in the street center, his face contorted with rage and fear. "Come out and face me," he screamed. "Fight like a real gunfighter." "Real gunfighters," Sarah's voice drifted through the smoke. "Don't need to prove anything." Another shot, another gun spinning away. They just get the job done. The morning sun hit the strategically placed mirrors, creating a web of light through the smoke. To McGrath's men, it looked like dozens of figures moving through the haze, each one capable of shooting a gun from their hands before they could squeeze the trigger. Jake's voice came again. "Last chance, McGrath! Surrender now, or learn why they really called me Lightning." "Never!" McGrath drew his hidden derringer, aiming at Lucy's head. "Show yourself or she dies." The next sequence happened faster than human eyes could follow. Sarah and Jake emerged from opposite directions, implementing the falling star's final movement. Their shots came so close together they sounded like a single report. McGrath's derringer split in half, along with his gun belt, boot gun, and every weapon carried by his remaining men. The gang leader stood disarmed, his clothes riddled with holes that had somehow missed his flesh, his arsenal reduced to spinning pieces of metal in the dust. Around him, his men threw up their hands in surrender, their will to fight shattered by a display of shooting that seemed to defy natural law. "How?" McGrath whispered, staring at his empty hands. 5 years of intelligence, every move planned, every angle covered. Sarah emerged fully from the smoke, her gun trained steadily on McGrath's heart. Jake appeared beside her, their stance identical, their presence radiating the same deadly calm. "You spent 5 years," Sarah said quietly, "learning exactly what we wanted you to learn, watching exactly what we wanted you to see." "The real secrets," Jake added, "the ones that make a legend, those get passed down differently." He smiled. "Slightly, and now you know why some legends are best left alone." The morning sun broke fully over Dead River, revealing McGrath's entire force disarmed and surrounded, their weapons scattered in pieces across the street. Not a single casualty, but a victory so complete it would spawn its own legends. And at the center of it all stood Lightning Mitchell and his daughter, living proof that some skills ran deeper than mere speed, some techniques defied simple observation, some legends, it seemed, only grew stronger with time. McGrath stood alone in the street, his men disarmed and captured, his careful plans shattered, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes, the look of a predator with one last card to play. "Impressive show," he said, his voice carrying an edge of madness. "The great Lightning Mitchell and his perfect student, but you forgot something." His hand moved to his collar, pulling free a hidden string. A metallic click echoed from the hotel. "I rigged the whole town with enough dynamite to send it straight to hell." Sarah's gun didn't waver. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" McGrath smiled coldly. "While Charlie was feeding me bad intelligence about your shooting, my real men were working. Every major building wired to blow. One pull of this trigger, and Dead River becomes a memory." Jake's voice carried deadly calm. "You'll die too. Maybe, but my reputation won't. The man who ended Lightning Mitchell, that's worth dying for." The street fell silent. McGrath's remaining men edged away from buildings, confirming his threat. The gang leader's finger tightened on the crude detonator. "So, here's how this ends," McGrath continued. "You lower those guns, let me ride out. Otherwise, we all meet our maker together." Sarah's mind raced through options. The falling star technique could disarm him, but not before he triggered the explosives. Even their fastest draw couldn't beat a finger already on a trigger. Then she saw it. The slight shift in her father's stance, the same tell she'd learned to read during countless secret practice sessions. Jake had spotted something she hadn't. "One problem with your plan, McGrath." Jake's voice carried no fear, only certainty. "You're so busy watching our guns, you forgot about the real threat." "What?" McGrath started to turn, but it was too late. Silent, Pete lived up to his name. No one had noticed him slip away during the falling star display. Now he emerged from the hotel's shadow, his movement a blur. Before McGrath could react, the detonator was flying through the air, expertly caught by Sarah's left hand. The gang leader went for his last hidden gun, a tiny derringer strapped to his back. But this time, there was no need for fancy techniques or impossible shots. Sarah and Jake fired as one, their bullets meeting in midair to split McGrath's derringer into useless fragments. The gang leader stumbled backward, staring at his empty hands in disbelief. "That's not... You can't..." His composure cracked completely. "What are you people? Just a father and daughter." Sarah kept her gun trained steady. "Who learned that real skill isn't about speed or tricks? It's about patience, about knowing when to strike." Marshal Hawthorne stepped forward, handcuffs ready. "Jack McGrath, you're under arrest for attempted murder, extortion, and enough other charges to keep you in prison until Judgment Day." But McGrath had one final moment of defiance. With a howl of rage, he lunged for Sarah's gun. Time seemed to slow as Jake called out, "Now, girl, just like we practiced." What happened next would be debated in saloons across 3 territories. Some said it was impossible, that no one could shoot that fast or that precisely. Others swore. On their mothers' graves, they saw it happen. Sarah's gun blurred into motion, firing 6 times in less than a second. Each bullet struck McGrath's clothes, pinning him spread-eagled to the hotel wall without drawing a drop of blood. Before the last shell casing hit the ground, Jake had fired an identical pattern, his bullets threading between Sarah's to complete. The human outline... McGrath hung there, trapped by a perfect pattern of shots that had somehow managed to miss his flesh entirely while leaving him completely immobilized. "That," Jake said quietly, "was your mother's favorite trick. She always said true skill was about knowing how not to kill, even when you could." The morning sun climbed higher over Dead River as Marshal Hawthorne's men began dismantling McGrath's explosives. The gang leader's remaining forces surrendered without a fight, their spirits broken by a display of shooting skill that went beyond mere legend. Sarah holstered her gun, feeling the weight of legacy and responsibility. She had become more than just Lightning Mitchell's daughter. She had helped write a new chapter in the legend, one that would be told around campfires for generations to come. "You know," Jake said softly, pride evident in his voice, "your mother would be mighty proud of how you handled that." Around them, Dead River began to come back to life. The fires were extinguished, the hostages freed. The threat ended not with a bloodbath, but with a demonstration of skill so precise it bordered on miraculous. And standing in the center of it all, father and daughter shared a quiet smile, knowing that some legends don't just survive, they grow stronger with each new generation. A week after McGrath's defeat, Dead River was transformed. The damage from the fires had been repaired, the buildings strengthened, the community bound together by shared survival. But the greatest change wasn't physical. It was in how people carried themselves, walking taller, unafraid. Sarah sat on the Mitchell Ranch porch, cleaning her gun with the same careful precision her father had taught her. Jake rocked beside her, no longer pretending any infirmity. "Town's different," she observed, watching riders approach from Dead River. "People look at us different now." "That's the weight of legend," Jake replied. "Folks need something to believe in. Now they've got a story worth telling. How a father and daughter protected not just their home, but their whole community." Marshal Hawthorne's posse had departed 2 days ago, taking McGrath and his surviving men to face justice. The gang leader's network of corrupt officials was unraveling, his carefully built criminal empire collapsing as witnesses came forward. "Got word from the territorial office," Sheriff Wilson said, riding up to their porch. McGrath's singing, like a bird, trying to save his own neck, named every judge and official he bought. Territory's going to be cleaner for it. But that wasn't why he'd come. Sarah saw the subtle tension in his stance, the way his hand stayed near his gun. "What else, Sheriff? 3 riders came through this morning. Gunfighters, looking to make a name. Asked about Lightning Mitchell's daughter." Jake's expression didn't change, but his voice carried a note of concern. "It's starting already. Same thing that drove me into retirement. Every would-be legend, wanting to test themselves." Sarah holstered her cleaned gun with fluid grace. "Let them come. We'll show them what you showed McGrath. That true skill isn't about killing or reputation. It's about protecting what matters." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Town's behind you, after what you did for us. Well, any gunfighter wanting trouble will find more than they bargained for." As Wilson rode away, Davis and the old crew approached. They'd stayed to help rebuild, but Sarah saw they were ready to move on. "Time we were riding," Davis said, touching his hat brim. "Got word of trouble down south, people needing help." "Could use another gun," Tucker added, looking at Sarah, "especially one trained by Lightning himself." But Sarah just smiled, shaking her head. "My place is here. Dead River needs protectors who understand that skill without conscience is just another form of violence." Jake stood, embracing his old friends. "Take care of yourselves and spread the word. Anyone looking to make a name by challenging my daughter better be ready to learn why some legends are best left in peace." As the old crew rode out, Sarah caught a glimpse of movement in town. Lucy was teaching younger girls to shoot, using the techniques Sarah had shown her. The banker's son was practicing fast draws, but with an emphasis on accuracy over speed. Dead River was learning to protect itself. "You knew, didn't you?" Sarah asked her father. "All those years of secret training showing Charlie just enough to make McGrath overconfident. You were preparing me not just to fight, but to teach." Jake smiled. "Your mother said it best. True strength isn't in having power. It's in knowing how to use it wisely." He watched the town's children practicing their draws with wooden guns. Sometimes the best legacy isn't just in being the fastest, but in showing others a better way. The sun set over Dead River, painting the sky in shades of gold. Sarah Mitchell, daughter of Lightning, sat with her father and watched their community thrive. They'd faced down a monster not just with speed and skill, but with wisdom and restraint. New legends were already spreading, not just about Lightning Mitchell's impossible shots or his daughter's mastery of the falling star technique, but about how they'd won their greatest victory without taking a single life. About how true legends weren't built on notches in a gun, but on lives protected and peace preserved. "Ready for what comes next?" Jake asked quietly. Sarah checked her gun one last time, feeling the weight of responsibility and legacy. "Always. After all," she smiled at her father, "you taught me well." Together, father and daughter watched the stars emerge over Dead River, knowing that while some legends faded with time, others only grew stronger. Their story would be told around campfires for generations, not as a tale of violence and revenge, but as proof that the greatest power came not from the gun, but from the heart and mind behind it. And in Dead River, where a father had passed, his skills to his daughter, and she had used them to protect rather than destroy, a new kind of legend was just beginning.